I'm Brian Van, sportbiketrackgear.com, and today we're going to install a set of Vortex Superbike Rearsets on our 2015 Yamaha YZF-R1 STG project bike. Okay, the Vortex Rearsets, as always, are packaged very nicely. They come with exploded views and complete instructions that allow you to install these like a professional. We're going to begin by opening everything up, getting the shift side on the shift side, the brake side on the brake side, and then we'll be back and we'll begin our project. Okay, to get this started, I've got the tools ready, I've got the parts ready to go. One thing I noticed that was different with this kit is they're going to want you to use this top hat spacer as well as that rubber grommet on their exhaust mounting bracket. With the exhaust that we have on this bike right now, the Akrapovic 3/4 system, we're going to have to do this. So I went over and I gathered this up because remember, we're taking off a pair of aftermarket rear sets right now. So I have this ready. I've got everything lined out. I have Allen's T-handles, 3mm, 4, 5, and 6. Got a flat-bladed screwdriver. I have metric wrenches, 10, 12, and 14. That's what I have out thus far. I also got some red Loctite as well as some multi-purpose grease to lubricate a couple of the moving parts on this. We're going to open up by simply removing the rear sets that are on the motorcycle right now. This is a pair of driven TT rear sets. I've rode the majority of the year on these. Excellent product, enjoyed them quite a bit. Thus far, we have installed Woodcraft, Driven, and now we're on to the Vortex. We've waited quite a while for these. What Vortex did that was different than both Woodcraft and Driven is they have come out with a pair of fixed rear sets. They've decided, okay, through racing, exactly where they wanted to put the rear set position. One of the things that we're going to do, because right now I do have the bike, right, the rear sets are set at 0, okay? The Driven rear sets, I actually left them at the stock position and they worked perfectly for me. As we go through this process, I'm going to take a quick measurement from here to here and I'm going to pick a fixed point on the engine, forward to back, and we'll compare the Vortex rear set so I can give you an idea of how much different they are from stock. Okay, we'll just go ahead and continue removing the rear sets from the motorcycle. This is a pretty basic procedure. I don't think most will really struggle with this at all. Got to deal with your brake master cylinder, the exhaust bracket, and then of course the mounting points to the frame of the motorcycle itself. It's pretty basic stuff. Of course, we'll save all of the hardware and fasteners. The Vortex kit looks like it includes everything that you're going to need. So really, I don't feel like we're going to reuse much of the stock stuff. And as I said earlier too, we're replacing the Driven right now with the Vortex. At the end of the day, I'm not going to say one's better than the other. They're all different, okay? Woodcraft is different from Driven as Vortex would be, of course, from each of them. The reason we're doing it is just to give you an idea of how they fit compared to one of the other manufacturers, right? Because as we all know, we all have different tastes, have different brands that we really prefer to use. So we're going to try and show you as many as we possibly can on the R1. Got to remove the cotter pin for the rear brake master attachment here. You're typically able to reuse this cotter pin. We've been using the same one still all the way through the process. If you end up damaging it, it's really not that big of a deal. If you don't have a cotter pin, what I found that works good is a nice substitute if you need to in a pinch. is you can use a little bit of safety wire if you don't have the right pin or you don't have an opportunity to go out to a hardware store and grab one. Okay, there we go. We have the driven rear set off the bike, and now we'll begin to mock up the Vortex. Okay, the first thing that we're going to start with is we're going to begin by assembling our brake pedal. The way Vortex has this set up, okay, these are spring-loaded, and they always need to be able to move in the rearward direction. If you have a fall, you're going forward, right, they'll push, and it helps to prevent these from breaking. They have designed this so that you're able to control the length of the brake and or shift pedal, in this case the brake pedal, by mounting it like so that the tabs are at the end of the brake lever itself, the brake pedal. That makes the lever as long as possible. You rotate it, say you want a shorty, right? Maybe you have smaller feet. You'll again want to make sure that this is able to move in the rearward direction so it functions properly. But you can see you're going to have quite a difference in length for that brake and or shift pedal. For my purposes, right, I wear a 12 US, we're just going to go ahead and go with a full length pedal like so. To begin this process, we need to put the mount onto the brake lever. This is an area where they do recommend some red Loctite, and I would agree with that because once this is in position, this fastener is in position, you're really not able to access it again because you're going to have the toe piece in the way. Also got a nice quality tapered head fastener. A lot of surface area contact there. That really helps to keep it tight as well. Torque it down. We've got our red Loctite. Of course, it's a tapered head, so that'll be good to go. Now for the real fun part. Okay, putting this thing together. This can be a little bit of a challenge. I'm going to tell you that right up front. I like to install it, right? So the pin is going to be inserted from the top down. That is the best and safest way to do that. I actually had the pin for the brake lever in my hand there, for the brake master. Okay, this is the pin. You want to insert it from the top down. There's a couple of lubrication points that we're going to work with here. Just a little bit of lube. You don't need to go crazy with it. And we'll use a screwdriver to capture a little grease here. And we're going to put just a thin coat here as well as here. And at the end of the day, just a little bit on the pin is also going to be a good idea. Okay, we're all lubed up. I'm going to slide the spring into position first, right? It needs to be set so that one leg of the spring is pushing down against the brake pedal. The other leg, and it's all in the instructions, is going to be against the back side of our brake pedal tip. The toe piece there. So now what we want to do is take our pivot pin. We're just going to get that started through both the brake pedal and then one side of the actual toe piece itself. So just kind of get that stuff lined up. This is going to allow us to get started. Now we need to get it to come by the spring. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little downward pressure, right, on that, so where I'm actually pushing on the pin, and then I'm going to use a screwdriver here to pull the spring further back in, right? It doesn't really take a whole lot of pressure here, and now you can see I've got that to pass by the spring. Now we need to go by the actual toe piece itself, and then of course through the actual brake pedal. I like to take like a little awl here, and it just allows me to get inside of that pin and put a little pressure. You can see I'm wiggling it as I put the pressure. Now I've got it past the toe piece, so we're in pretty decent shape here. From there, just manipulate it a little bit and go ahead and get that to push all the way through. Okay, a little bit of a tight fit here, but we're going to knock the awl out once I've put our cotter pin or our circlip in place. I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and get our clip. If you have a really small pair of snap ring pliers, you can use those, or you can very carefully, remember, you don't want to fling this thing across the shop. My cameraman's backing up right now. I think He's worried that he could catch this with his eyeball. And I spread it open, right? Let's turn it, make sure it's on there completely. It's in the groove. Test the action. The action of it is very good. Now we need to just get our awl out of there, right? Knock that out. And that's what it should look like when you're done. Our next step is going to be securing the actual brake pedal itself, right? And the foot peg to the footrest. What Vortex has done here is really smart. The foot pegs are keyed. This is another spot where if you choose to, you can use some Loctite. We're going to want to put the foot peg on first before we actually put the brake pedal in place. Use your supplied fastener. I'm going to go no Loctite here. And this is a 6 mil. And by design, the way they have that foot peg locking into place, you'll be able to put a good amount of torque on this. If you want to use Loctite there, blue or red, either would work out well. Now we have this put together. Let's refer now to our instructions, and they're going to want to have a washer, which is of course supplied, that goes in between the brake pedal mounting bolt and the actual bracket itself, and we'll get all this lubed up and ready to put together. Okay, I'm going to lubricate this just a little bit here inside the bearings. Probably not 100% necessary, but any point where you have a pivot, I think lubricating is never a bad idea. Go ahead and pass through the supplied mounting bolt. Pretty tight fit there. There is the supplied washer. And we'll now get this started. And then we're going to tighten it up using, I believe it was a 14 wrench that fit this fastener that they supplied. There you go. Very solid action, right? Feels super smooth. I don't really feel any play in the bearings, which is nice. Okay, next steps. I'm going to begin now getting the brake master cylinder mounted up to this Vortex rear set, and then we'll finish up by putting the exhaust bracket together and then in place. I'm going to use just a little bit of lubrication here too. All right, get some inside there. And we'll do the same here. All right, and we'll get our pin. Install that. We're going to reuse the same cotter pin. Hopefully I'll make it a couple more rounds here. All right. Make sure you secure it. Into position. This bends really easily. You can always use a pair of pliers or something if you want to. But you want to make sure that you've got it secured properly. Okay, we've got the cotter pin wrapped around nicely. Now we're going to begin getting the rear set ready to mount up to the bike. Let's get that cool heel guard. It's a brand new design here from Vortex for the Yamaha R1. Some cool new machining in this. Looks real high-end. Always made great looking stuff. I like this new design. I'm not going to use any Loctite at any of these points. And the reason for that is, as you know, we're installing a lot of different parts in this bike. It just makes disassembling and reassembling more difficult. These are 2 points. We're using a little blue Loctite. Not a bad idea. If you're not comfortable torquing this by hand, Google the torque specs and grab yourself a torque wrench and use that. Let's go ahead and snug up our mounting points here. We'll torque these, and then we'll torque the brake master cylinder and the heel guard. I like how all the fasteners are recessed, looks phenomenal. Okay, get that all torqued. Now, what I'm going to recommend to you, based on where the adjuster is for the master cylinder, you need to get on your motorcycle with your riding boots and double check your reach to the lever. Make sure that pedal is in the position you want it. Once you get this exhaust bracket on here, okay, you can clearly see that is going to make accessing that a lot more difficult. So instead of going through, assembly, disassembly, and reassembly, go ahead and jump up there and do that right now. I'm not going to be riding the bike anytime soon. It's winter here in Michigan, right? We're getting there. So I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to highly recommend to you that you take the time and do that so the bike's ready to ride when you take it out next time. Now we're going to prep the exhaust bracket for installation. We need to reuse this top hat spacer as well as the rubber grommet that's inside the bracket itself. We'll begin by pushing the top hat spacer out. And then we'll use a screwdriver here to get in here and deform the grommet a little bit. You can see clearly they've mimicked the shape of the factory Yamaha part. Here's another spot where just a little bit of lubrication will go a long way. Push that in like so, super easy. And we're able to get that top hat spacer in there. What I'm going to do here is, for this purpose, I'm going to install it like so. We've got our Allen head bolts here. Get those in position, get those started. Some of the exhausts that we've worked with don't require the use of the exhaust bracket. I think it was the Aero system that came with its own, right? But for the Akrapovic, we need to have that in place. Okay, we've got our hardware. Let's go ahead and tighten these bolts up. This is another good spot to use a little blue Loctite if you're going to have what we hope would be a long-term assembly for you. But like I said, in our case, this will be taken apart fairly soon. Snug up the bracket for the exhaust. Like so. Okay. Everything's set. Make sure you pump up your brake pedal, of course, before you ride it. I'm assuming you've already adjusted your shift rod. Now let's get an idea of where these are positioned as compared to the stock. They are about an inch higher. And stock in terms of how far back they're mounted. So these are a little bit higher. It looks like from the measurement I took, the foot peg is a little different too. So we are going to be almost, an inch, about 3/4 of an inch to an inch higher than the factory fixed foot peg, which crashes very nicely. They've got the slider on the end of the foot peg. And then of course, your foldable lever tip. Okay, we're going to begin working now on the shift side. I've taken a look at the directions. You're able to run this in either standard or GP shift. If you're running it in standard shift, you will leave the shift knuckle in the position it is right now. For GP shift, you're actually going to have to reverse this so that it points rearward, okay? So, begin by loosening this as we disassemble the shift side rear set. Get that loose. The shift lever itself includes a heim joint, right? So we will not be using the heim joint that's mounted here. So let's go ahead and loosen up the lock nut for that. Allow us to get that off of there. Quite likely we'll have to make a shifter adjustment after the fact. Just like I said on the other side with the brake lever, make sure you use your riding boots that you're going to ride the bike in. That way when you adjust it, you get a good adjustment the first time. You don't have to revisit that. In order to flip the shift knuckle, you need to completely remove this fastener. We're going to do that now. Now we'll remove the shifter itself from the bike. This fastener will not be reused. With the quick shifter that we have on there, we're able to facilitate both clutchless upshifts as well as clutchless downshifts. It's a part we've got in the 2015 R1 part section on our site, and I got to tell you, that thing is an absolute blessing. Probably one of the coolest things I've ever used. Get an idea of where that heim joint was at. Okay, take a look at that. Now what you could do here is reuse the stocker, right? And that way you're still going to have that protective boot in place. So let's take a look and see if that's going to be possible here, because I think in the end that could be a positive. Having the heim joint protected should increase its life cycle quite a bit, because they were actually under a tremendous stress. So we're going to go ahead and remove the Vortex one and see if we're going to be able to do this. So I think that would be a little plus. You'll need to use the Vortex hardware, because rather than being threaded into the shifter itself, it's actually passing through. Grab all that. Now, there's no reason that we can't do this, so we'll just go ahead and reuse that factory heim joint, which personally I think is a good call. Then you can save that other heim joint in your spares. Okay, make sure that's good and tight. Cover that back up. Okay, we've got the heim joint on there that we're going to use. Now it's time to assemble the shift lever itself. Now remember, okay, this is going to be kind of the reverse of the brake side, as this is how the lever fits on the motorcycle right here. So you need to decide, you know, what lever length you want. Where do you want this toe piece? What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it this way. You know, like I said earlier, you know, I'm wearing a size 12 US. So I'm going to run with a little bit shorter lever, okay? So it's the opposite of the other side because of the orientation of the lever itself. Your first order of business is to bolt the mounting bracket down. Remember, they want you to use a little red Loctite, and I do agree with that because the levers are under quite a bit of stress, especially the shift side. You're constantly, when you're on the racetrack, shifting. So there's a lot of pressure on that pedal. So let's make sure this is going to stay good and tight and we don't have any issues with that. Nothing's worse than having to work on your motorcycle when you're at the track, when you could be riding it. So we'll get this bolted down. We're going to lubricate this a little bit, like we showed you earlier. We'll also lubricate the actual toe piece. And now remember, it's still, right, it needs to be mounted so that it can fold back this way. You don't want it folding forward, you want it folding back this way. So you need to orient it like this on the pedal. Let's get some grease, lube this up, and get it put together. Okay, just a little bit of multi-purpose grease here. And we're going to repeat the same process as we showed you on the other side. A little less work at the end of the day, typically on the shift side than there is the brake side. Okay, we're going to go ahead and begin sliding the pivot pin through. This could be really tricky. I'm not going to BS you here. I think if you've watched me install any of the other Vortex rear sets, you can work at this a little bit. And even though I've done this multiple times, it still can be kind of challenging. So to get it to start coming by the spring, there we go. We got it past the first coil. Now we'll put some pressure on the pin from the bottom to the top. Get it to just jump by it until we're to the point where it's ready to pass through the actual toe piece itself. It's right there. And this one's actually treating me a little better than the other side did. Didn't even have to use the awl to get it through. Okay. All right, we're going to slide the snap ring into place. I don't really have the right set of snap ring pliers, so we're just using the old spread it apart with a screwdriver trick. You saw how I kept good downward pressure on it, so it didn't fling off of there. If it takes you a couple of tries, don't freak out. It's okay. Might have taken me a couple of tries too. I'm probably just not going to show it to you. Perfect. Okay. Now, we'll go ahead and thread this in. We're using the same shift rod that we got with our auto blip downshift kit. No need to change any of that. Kind of get it started. Jump in there. Okay. All right, and while we're here, we'll rotate this around like so. And slide this in. I'm just going to mock this up, and I'll show you why here in a minute. Now let's go ahead and get the rear set off of the motorcycle. There's a couple of things I want to look at before I tighten any of that up and explain that as we go. It's really important that you have the right angles on the shift knuckle. If you don't, you really lose some mechanical advantage. You have a negative impact on shifting, and you definitely do not want to do that. Let's go ahead and put our foot peg on here. Just like the other side, locking foot peg locks right into the footrest. Install the heel guard once we're in position here on the bike. Torque that down. Grab the wrong two fasteners there. like we said on the other side, not a bad spot to use a little Loctite here and the heel guard, right? But this thing will be swapped out before we have to worry about that, so we're not going to use it. Torque down. Good looking heel guard design here, of course. Our friends at Vortex. Get those bad boys torqued down. And then we're going to be ready to dial in our shifter. Okay, we're close. What I really want to focus on right now is making sure that we have a 90-degree angle between the shift knuckle and the shift rod. That is where the greatest mechanical advantage will be enjoyed. The greater the mechanical advantage, the smoother and easier the shifting. So that is very, very critical to what we're doing here. And you'll note that the way this all ends up coming together, once I have this rod, the shifter all adjusted and everything, we're gonna have pretty close to a 90-degree angle down here. So there's a lot of mechanical advantage that was built into this, and that is on purpose for smooth shifting. Just as we did on the other side, we wanna make sure we use just a little bit of lubrication here. Slide that bearing back in place so that we're able to get the bolt in and out without any issues. We'll use the screwdriver that I have slightly modified just to put a thin coat of grease so the bolt can pass through easily. The directions call for a washer to be used on the back side, so we're ready with that. This is some real nice hardware they've supplied here. Let's go ahead and push that through. Washer on the back side. Once again, this is another good place for Loctite. You know, especially if this is something you intend to leave together for extended periods of time. You know, our circumstances here are just a little bit different. 14mm wrench is going to allow us to tighten that up. And from there, get that good and snug. Bearings feel nice and tight, I like that. Okay, now, regardless of where we're at with shifter adjustment, okay, what I do want to do is I want to make sure that we preserve this 90-degree angle. So we're going to go ahead and tighten up our shift knuckle right now. Before the bike's ridden, I will adjust both the brake and the shift side to my personal preference, right? Get it all feeling good. But considering the fact, like I said earlier, that it's pretty much winter here in Michigan now, we're mid-November, I won't be riding this bad boy until we get to the spring, unfortunately. So for my circumstance, there's no need to even dial it in right now. It's gonna be a while till I get on the bike, and we may even be installing another set of rear sets somewhere in between now and that very next ride. Get this bad boy all snugged up, and we'll tighten up the jam nut on the shift rod, and then we'll close this video up. Okay, we've got everything installed now. Like I said, just some finite adjustments are going to be necessary with the brake and the shifter. That's real minor stuff. I'll do that before I ride it. Let's close it up, you know, with the things that I really like here. I like the design, the fixed Superbike rear set, very focused. With adjustable rear sets, let's be honest, how many times do you honestly move them around myself? Never really a lot. They worked with one of the highest level Yamaha racing teams in the US on this part. That part was run by them this year. They're in what they found to be just the right spot for the average track rider. You know, maybe if you're super tall or super short, could be a problem, right? Because this is kind of put right in that median spot for most riders. Other things I like the fact that it comes with that folding toe peg, right? It's got the rubber piece on it, very professional. You're able to adjust that, that's great. The foot pegs have a ton of traction over the years. They've really kind of cut down on the aggressiveness quite a bit. It's just the right mix right now. It's got a little slider puck that's inserted in the end of the peg. It's also kind of a breakaway peg. What I've seen a lot of riders do too is for even more ground clearance if they need it, they'll actually cut the peg right here and run a shorter peg depending on how you like to position your foot on the motorcycle. Something else I really liked is I like what they did with the shifter on the other side. You're really getting two very strong 90-degree angles, tons of mechanical advantage there when shifting. And for racing, right, track riding or even street riding, the better it shifts, the more fun the bike is to ride, for sure. And they really spent a lot of time engineering that into this motorcycle. Overall, I like it. Vortex makes a great product. I don't have one negative thing to say about this. All the replacement parts are ready and available. Great piece. This is the Vortex Superbike Rearset install on our 2015 STG Yamaha YZF-R1.